Hi, my name is Cameo McRoberts, and this exhibit is taken out of context at the Main Street Gallery.
What inspired you to begin creating these beautiful collages?
I'm really fascinated with print media and obviously images of women. And I have a set of magazines from the early 1900s up until most recent. And I was fascinated with how the language that was used to talk about women in all manner of magazines, fashion magazines, adult magazines, teen magazines, and throughout history, that language has changed quite a bit and hasn't always been as gracious to females as it should be. And so my idea for this piece or this exhibit was to sort of take those images out of the context that they were placed in and reimagine them and sort of give them a different setting to sort of be celebrated in.
Was there any particular article that you saw while flipping through the magazines that inspired you?
Yeah, I was in Chicago hanging out at my really good friend's house who is also an artist, and she's inspired me a lot. And I had a Look magazine from 1960 that was talking about an aeronautical pioneer who was a woman who was training with the Apollo 7. And the article was just, it talked about her getting coffee for the boys and calling her 7.5. And while she was doing the exact same training as all of those astronauts, the chances of her going to space were very unlikely. It was very dismissive, even though science dictates that females would do better in space flight. And then my friend, juxtapositionally, I guess, in contrast, had the current article of National Geographic that was talking about how women's bodies and women in particular were more suited for spaceflight. And so looking at those 40 years apart, it was really interesting to me and it stuck out. And so I started just kind of looking back at these other articles that I had read and just really empathizing with these smart, intelligent women that were sort of, the language was still being used as if they were, cute and girls, and it was quaint that they happened to succeed at something. So I wanted them to succeed.
Would you say you were trying to create or display a new perspective on these old articles?
Certainly. And I think at some point the articles themselves, they're not direct translations of the articles or in protest of the articles. Pretty soon it just became about the shapes and the textures and the images themselves and sort of using them as an artist would use paint to make the composition and to create an aesthetic. And so I think that while it started I kept feeling like I needed to be more literal, but at one point I had to let go of being literal. So it was based in that, and then it just sort of became part of, I'm emotionally attached to pretty much every single piece of paper I cut out of there, so it became a different kind of experience.
I'm really drawn to this one in the corner that has two women sitting on the edge of the moon, having a great time.
Yeah, that piece is interesting. It's that piece is interesting. It started out very differently. It was I kept going back to it and I kept going back to it, and then I found that image of the ladies sitting on the fence, and there's just such a joy there and such a sort of friend, a comradeship that it kind of almost just fell onto the piece as I was working onto another piece, and then it became something entirely different, and then it still wasn't done, and then I found the palm tree, and the palm tree kind of finished the whole thing off. But the more that I looked at it and the more that I kind of marinated on it, it started to remind me of how I feel when I get to hang out with my lady friends and we're talking about everything, and it sort of expands the universe for us, and I think that's and there's just there's so much kind of color and joy in it and the perspective, and it's a piece that I'm very proud of.
I see that we have a nice montage running
Yes.
behind you. Tell us a little bit about that.
So When I worked at the Arts Council, for the Blueberry Arts Festival, I've always had the community arts projects, and I really like to incorporate in my art just different media and a way for people to participate in the art. And I had a couple of different ideas, and because of COVID restrictions and stuff as it evolved, I knew that I wouldn't be able to do them. And so when I started preparing for the show, I bought a GoPro and I attached it above my workstation in my tiny little living room in my tiny house. My poor child has given up 3/4 of the living room to my art space right now. But I started recording it as I would sit down and work on pieces. And to me, I like to watch process videos on Instagram, and I like to see how people use social media that way. So to me, it was really fun to watch how stuff evolved. There's certain pieces on there that I ruined, and I look at them in that video and I see the moment where I ruined them. And there's other ones where, like the ladies on the fence, it just was happenstance that they happened to be next to each other. So I wanted to kind of bring that into the exhibit so that people could kind of see the process. There's a lot of pieces in the exhibit that are on the film, and there's a lot of pieces that didn't make it. So, and as I started building it, it kind of reminded me of my workspace, so I collaged around the screen and wanted to kind of bring part of that chaos into, anybody that does paperwork or collage work will tell you it's not a neat, creative, exit, because you have to be able to move things around on the paper, and you have to have a lot of ephemera around you. You don't just pick one picture and pick another picture. So I wanted to share part of that.
I noticed that some pieces you have a larger version of it and a smaller version of it. Why was that decision made to have both up there?
That's been a process too, and all of this is just really a learning process for me as an artist. As I finished pieces, I wanted to have some of them available for prints, and so I had them scanned and some prints made. And for some of them, I realized that the printing process that sort of presses it back down and turns it back into a two-dimensional image is an effective part of the creative process. And so there's some images that I decided that I felt like adding that one last step created the finished product. And then there's plenty of images that original holds its own, meets the criteria of what I wanted the piece to look like, but I also want to offer it as prints. So I wanted to be able to show people how those two look together. And so not everything is offered as a print, or not everything is the print is the final product. So for me, it was just another step in the learning process, and some of them can stand alone on their own, and some of them, that extra layer of processing, I felt just made them better pieces.
And how many pieces are here, and for how long is the exhibit up?
There are approximately 35, 37, somewhere around there. And it is up through the 29th of January. Yes. I'm a little overwhelmed by it. It's pretty cool.
It's your first solo show, right?
It is. And I worked with artists when I worked at the Arts Council, and I've got to put other people's artwork up. I think in that, learning a lot about how to see art on the wall, to see how a show comes together from the logistical end, and to sort of, I was able to kind of put all of that stuff together as I was planning the show, and it was really, really helpful for me. But it was also, kind of a learning process as well as like I said, I've always been kind of crafty, and I've made little projects here and there, and I'm always kind of putzing with something. It wasn't until I worked at the Arts Council and worked with other artists and saw how their processes worked that I started to realize that a lot of my own processes were more from an artist standpoint, and it helped me kind of treat myself as an artist rather than an appreciator of art. And I love all kinds of art, and so it's fun to kind of put myself into that area, that arena.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yay.